So you want to say a little bit more about the pressure points on our economic legacy that showed up in Edgar's quote? We've talked about sort of like there's this money piece and then this legacy, as he talks about, of slavery and colonization, and a set of policies that have shaped, because, by the way, the people who have money in this country today and the people who don't have money in this country have inherited that economic legacy.
Right. Yeah. So, again, if we go back to the role of government, so I would say, thankfully, some things that we know a little bit about more in our collective narrative. So we know a little more collectively about redlining, for example.
And could you define this?
Yeah, sure. So again, can't give you a super formal definition, but essentially, I would say differently valuing, devaluing homes in certain neighborhoods that were predominantly occupied by certain groups. So, for example, Black neighborhoods, other neighborhoods of people of color, working class neighborhoods. And so then when it came to kind of appraising the value of these homes for mortgages, et cetera, then they were redlined. And I believe the notion of redlining kind of comes from actual maps where red lines were drawn around these areas that had reasons to devalue them. They were unsafe, or they were blighted, or they were riskier for one reason or another. But it boiled down to discrimination. It boiled down to racism. It boiled down to classism. And the relationship between that and wealth is home ownership is not the only, but is one of the primary paths to wealth in this country. I would say that that's also something that can change. But if that's one of the primary paths that are being made accessible, and you have entire communities that are just having a much, much harder time traversing that path than you can imagine, then wealth in those communities are a lot harder to acquire. We also know when we think about the creation of the GI Bill to encourage home ownership. And this was with veterans. And this, again, was denied to certain communities. Black communities, but not only Black communities. When you think of policies that are a little less directly related to wealth. So thinking about political power, thinking about what were some of the things we talked about already with participatory budgeting, decision-making power, who gets to shape what happens in your communities. And so when we think about the Jim Crow era and the suppression of voice that occurred during that era, and that occurs today when we think about gerrymandering, et cetera. So this is part of our legacy. So part of our economic legacy is outright economic oppression, direct economic oppression, political oppression, which is not unrelated to wealth and well-being, social oppression. Again, that is not unrelated to wealth and well-being. So that's one of our unfortunate legacies.
So there's one word that we haven't used yet, and I want to bring it in here, which is supremacist, because there's the opposite of liberatory practice is supremacist practice.
Yes.
And that's really what we're talking about, is a legacy, an economic legacy that is a supremacist economic structure from slavery forward through Jim Crow to some of the modern day policies and practices through to today, that Ujima is diametrically opposed to the creation of, right? So this is giving short shrift to that conversation, and the intent is not to go all the way into it, but just to point to, because where we want to focus on the future. We want to focus on the world that we're busy building, the world we want to create.
Right.
It's critical to know the context of why are we talking about liberatory economic practices and what are the ones that we've inherited in this country and beyond this country. So we're going to shift to that, and we're going to have to get into a conversation to understand liberatory and supremacist power.